Black and Caribbean activists. Good evening to everyone. I'm your MC for the evening. My name is Mishron Robinson, and I'm also a sitting youth voice on the National Task Force for Reparations and Economic Enfranchisement. We're going to open the panel discussion with the thoughts of Dr. Rodney Worrell on what are some of the small victories that we've seen in the last decade where the reparatory justice fight is concerned.
Thank you. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades. The theme is resistance, resilience, and reparations now. So if I just speak briefly to the theme, the reparations movement from its very inception has always been a movement of resistance, and given its long struggle, the enslaved people in Barbados were right after, or I should say on the eve of emancipation, they had a conception that they were going to be given reparations. So we can say that this movement is a movement of resilience. And if you think about from 1993 or so, Pan-Africanists on this space is being involved in this battle for reparations. And certainly the former enslaved wanted reparations now. Pan-Africanists want reparations now. And the peoples of the Caribbean, the governments of the Caribbean, they also want reparations now. We are at a critical juncture within the reparations movement. And therefore, when one is in a battle, there's always a time for reflection and a time for some kind of critical self-analysis. But there's also a time to look at the small victories, because if you don't look at the small victories, we will kind to get frustrated. But it's the small victories that will give us some solace and energy to go forward. So we can say the last 12 years within the reparations movement globally, especially and I'll speak a lot about North America and the Caribbean, because these will be tied when I look at this period of counter-revolution. So the last 12 years was very productive. I think there's a sister called Sister Tifa, who wrote a book called Reparations on Fire. And she was looking at the fact that the reparations movement in North America was really traveling like a fire. And she looked at the fact that governments, or I should say state legislatures in the United States, for example in California, they had formed commissions and they were discussing reparations. She recognized that universities, as well as some corporations like the Ben and Jerry ice cream, for example, or the Amalgamated Bank, they had started to speak about reparations as well. And churches and universities inside of North America had also engaged in conversations about reparations, or were engaged in symbolic forms of reparations, i.e., constructing statues and monuments of former enslaved people, outstanding black figures, etc. And a lot of this energy was driven by the George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter. So this was a period of racial reckoning inside of the United States. And this racial reckoning trickled beyond the United States. And I say trickle, but it probably was much stronger than a trickle. So, if I could come to the Caribbean and speak to the Caribbean, in the early 90s, when people used to speak about reparations, the people consider reparationists kind of mad people. And now we're saying that, for example, the Anglican Church and these individuals, right, the Anglican Church has apologized. We can debate the quantum of the money that the £100 million, whether that is sufficiently adequate for the development needs of the Caribbean. So that is a small victory. In Scotland, through the University of Glasgow and UWI-Caveville, they said that they were going to assist UWI in coming up with £20 million as a form of contribution to reparations. Lloyd's of England, they issued a formal apology and contributed a £52 million endowment. We have seen some of the families, like the Trevelyan family and the Gladstone family, Grenada and Guyana, contributing small sums, £100,000. But this is also a start. And the question is, what would happen with the Drax family? Of great importance was the fact that the Dutch government in 2019 issued an apology for its participation in slavery. And this was very significant because among reparationists, we felt that the dam was going to burst in terms of European countries apologizing for their role in reparations. However, the quantum of the money is also one. The 200 euros is also something that we can debate. We could also debate the fact that they did not engage with the CARICOM Commission on reparations, or the fact that they did not engage sufficiently with the people in the Dutch Caribbean and Suriname. So that is a lesson there as well. But that is also one of the victories that we shall cherish as well. We have seen several conferences, and these conferences are important areas of networking. And we have seen the Ghanaian president taking up, calling for reparations in the General Assembly of the United States. And we know that these allies, especially on the African continent, given the 50 plus members of the United Nations, that these will be critical allies, or the large number of African territories within the Commonwealth as well. The Brattle Report on the transatlantic slave trade is also an important landmark as well, because in the Brattle Report, they sought to quantify, so we are no longer operating on an unscientific basis in speaking about how much money is owed to the people of Barbados or how much money is owed to CARICOM. I can go on and on about these small victories, but we are in a period now of counter-revolutionary. So I should say a counter-revolutionary period. So all the time you have a victory, then you also have to expect some pushback. We have witnessed a slowing down and the reparations drive inside of the United States. And with the coming to power of Donald Trump on the far right in the United States, the reparations campaign would have to engage in a much more vigorous struggle. In fact, Trump is trumpeting some nonsense about giving reparations to whites who were discriminated against by affirmative action programs. So clearly, the reparations movement inside of the United States are confronted with a major obstacle. This also will have impact that it might be possible, or that the British Labour Party might be more amenable to having the conversation about reparations. But recently, the mouthings of David Lammy, who is of African descent, also he said that he is out of the lineage of enslaved people. He is saying that, that reparations is not about money, and somehow he's invoking that they can't pay reparations at this present time given the present cost of living. Now, a whole heap of money is going to Ukraine, and nobody is asking where this money is coming from, given the fact that we're dealing with the same kind of cost of living, etc. We also heard the Chancellor saying definitely that the British government is not going to pay any reparations, and we saw the avoidance at the recent Commonwealth meeting. So therefore, the challenge is to bring, and I must not get too negative, because whilst there was pushback against discussing reparations in the Commonwealth, there were sections of the British Labour Party that were holding a conference in support of reparations as well. So, but the conference clearly demonstrated the discomfort of the British Labour Party in engaging on the question of reparations. So I come to what is to be done. To energize and re-energize and keep the fire burning, we must try to make this reparations campaign a mass movement. And I think that we need to popularize reparations in all segments of the society, and it should not be perceived as just a vanguard kind of movement led by academics, Pan-Africanists, Rastafarians, etc. But we should have all sections of the society talking about reparations. All sections of the society should become knowledgeable about reparations. Sometimes I cringe at the kind of discussions about reparations, given the fact that the reparations conversation didn't start yesterday. To aid inside of the disseminating information about reparations, we need to, as was mentioned, as a historian, we need to get reparations in school. Some time ago, I was looking at the fact that El Sugavai in 1958 was fighting to have Caribbean history taught in the schools. This was before any of the British territories were independent. And I'm in 2024. So I don't need to say anymore. So we have taken one step back forward and a million steps backward. And so we have to go beyond these kind of contradictions as well. The revised 10-point plan, because I heard that the 10-point plan was revised. So this needs, or these revised points needs to be shared with the people.
It's now being revised.
Right. It's now being revised. I heard it was being revised a long time ago, but it's still being revised. Yeah, because we had offered a critique of the 10-point plan. Well, I didn't offer a critique. Some of my students doing reparative justice, and we were told that expect the new revised. But it is being revised, but we hope that this revised 10-point plan will be shared with the people, and it should be done in such a way, a massive launch, and the 10 points should be disseminated widely. We must continue to use the conferences and all spaces to build the support for reparations. And we must continue to call on the Drax family to release the plantation and the lands for reparations or for apartheid justice in Barbados. And these are my opening comments. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Worrell. We're going to pass on the baton to Ambassador, Barbados' Ambassador to CARICOM, David Commissiong, speaking on where are we now in the reparatory justice, in the reparations movement, and what are the practical next steps that we can take. Ambassador?
Thank you, Ms. Ron. Thank you very much. Is the mic working? Yes? Okay. Good evening, brothers and sisters. It's wonderful to see you here. Special welcome to our ambassadors from Cuba and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Welcome, welcome. So, where are we now? Let us examine the very latest developments. Rodney was being very optimistic. He pointed to the 19th of December 2022 apology by the then Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Prime Minister Mark Rutte, which was followed by an official apology issued by the King of the Netherlands. But I have news for Rodney. Holland subsequently had a general election. Mark Rutte's party lost the general election. There's a new prime minister, and the new administration actually piloted a resolution through the Dutch parliament confirming that the Dutch Holland will not be paying reparations. So whilst we heralded the historic Dutch apology, subsequent events have undone much of the positiveness of that development. And then we had, as Rodney indicated, the new British Prime Minister, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, indicating prior to the Commonwealth Heads of Government Conference in Samoa that his government was not prepared to discuss reparations at that conference and to entertain a resolution, a draft resolution, that was piloted by the CARICOM nations. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to share with you some of the text of that draft resolution. I want you to be aware of precisely what it is the CARICOM governments were attempting to engage the British government on, that the British government found so objectionable. So this is the operative part of the draft resolution. We, heads of government of the Commonwealth, this is what CARICOM is asking all of the Commonwealth heads to agree to. We, heads of government of the Commonwealth, A, agree to support the adoption of a second international decade for people of African descent commencing in 2025. Agree also to facilitate research on the transatlantic trade in enslaved Africans and chattel enslavement and the debilitation and dispossession of indigenous people. C, pledge to play an active role in bringing about inclusive conversations on acknowledgement of responsibility, compensation, commitment to non-repetition, return of cultural property, and to repairing the harm that resulted from the transatlantic trade in enslaved Africans and chattel enslavement and the debilitation and dispossession of indigenous peoples, paying special attention to women and girls. D, reaffirm our commitment to ending colonialism and its effects on the Commonwealth of Nations. And E, we agree to mandate the Commonwealth Secretary General to facilitate fora to engage governments and other stakeholders in consultations on reparatory justice. Very reasonable, won't you say? This is what they found so objectionable that they would not entertain it. I mean, admittedly, they have agreed that we will take it up at the UK CARICOM Forum, which will be held in March 2025. So let me put that out there. It was not a total rejection by the British government. The discussion has been postponed to March of 2025. But then you had the new leader of the Republican Party, Kemi Badenoch, a Nigerian no less, born in Nigeria, migrated to the UK in her mid-teens, and she expressed the view that reparations is a sham, that the UK owes the people of Africa and the Caribbean nothing, that in fact, she said, you know, the British Empire got some things wrong, but it got many things right. And she seems to be implying that one of the things that got right was the colonization and the enslavement of African people. Because that could be the only logical implication. If it got some things wrong, but many things right, and a claim for reparations is merely a sham, that there's no basis for claiming reparations, then colonization and enslavement, in her mind, would have to be one of the things that it got right. So that is what we are dealing with, brothers and sisters. And you know, when I looked at some of these recent developments, it came home to me that these people don't see us as human beings. And when I say these people, let me be very clear. I am referring to the oligarchical mindset. I'm referring to the ruling class. Because the saving grace is that you have people like the heirs of slavery. You have people like the Trevelyan's. You have people like the Gladstones. You have the other families that have come together and exhibited some moral conscience. You have the repair campaign. So that is the saving grace. But those who are members of the ruling class who exhibit that oligarchical mindset. They have never seen our ancestors as human beings, and by extension, they obviously do not see us as human beings. And that is why, that is the fundamental basis of their rejection of reparations. Their fundamental argument is that reparations are not due, that they don't owe reparations because when slavery was practiced, it was legal. That is what they've been saying for decades now. That is what they told me at the United Nations World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa in 2001. We don't owe you reparations because slavery was legal. And the concept of slavery being legal, the fundamental core of that idea that slavery could be legal, was that Africans were not human beings. And Barbadian brothers and sisters, I have news for you. That notion was confirmed, was orchestrated, was institutionalized right here in Barbados in the 17th century. It was that Barbadian planter class who controlled the colonial House of Assembly back in the 1660s. They had instituted slavery in Barbados from the very beginnings of the colony here, from 1627. They sought to legitimize it in 1636, but by 1661, when the enslaved component of the population was the majority, they decided that they had to institutionalize it in law. And so they passed an act in 1661 called an Act for the Better Ordering and Governing of Negroes. But let me explain the background. They had a problem. The problem was this. They had established slavery in a big way in Barbados. However, slavery had been abolished in England since the 12th century. Slavery was actually illegal in England. So they had a problem. They are practicing slavery, but their mother country and the legal system in place in Barbados said that they could not pass laws that were contradictory to the laws of the mother country. So this is what they did. In the preamble to that 1661 Act, this is what they said. They said, and I quote, "Whereas many good laws and ordinances have been made for the governing and regulating and ordering the Negroes, slaves in this island, and sundry punishments appointed to many of their misdemeanors, crimes, and offenses, and these formal laws being in many clauses imperfect and not fully comprehending the true constitution of this government in relation of their slaves, their Negroes, and heathenish, brutish, and uncertain, dangerous kind of people, we may extend the legislative power given us of provisionary laws for the benefit and good of this plantation, not being contradictory to the laws of England, there being in all the body of that law no trap to guide us where to walk, nor any rules set us how to govern such slaves." Understand what they're saying here. They're saying that they whatever laws they enact must not contradict the laws of England. And in England, there are no laws in England dealing with slavery. There's no track to guide us where to walk, nor any rules set us how to govern such slaves. And then they go on to say, yet we know that we must pass laws to protect these slaves as we do many other goods and chattels. Many other goods and chattels. So that's 1661. And then they go on from that preamble to pass these draconian regulations and punishments that amount to mutilation and whipping and branding and all kinds of horrible, horrible punishments that would never be permitted in the UK. So that law is passed in 1661, but by 1688, they feel the need to pass a new act. So they do away with the 1661 Act, and they replace it by a 1688 Act. And again, I want to give you the preamble to that act, and I quote, "Whereas the plantations and estates of this island cannot be fully managed and brought into use without the labor and service of great numbers of Negroes and other slaves. And for as much as the said Negroes and other slaves brought unto the people of this island for that purpose are of barbarous, wild, and savage natures, such savage natures, and such renders them wholly unqualified to be governed by the laws, customs, and practices of our nations. It therefore becomes absolutely necessary that such other constitutions, laws, and orders should be in this island framed and enacted for the good regulating and ordering of them, as may restrain the disorders, rapines, that is rapes, and inhumanities to which they are naturally prone and inclined." End of quote. Understand what they're doing here, right? So slavery is illegal in England. There's no laws in England dealing with how to regulate slaves because slavery is illegal. It does not exist. So they have said, so in England, it is a crime to kidnap a human being. In England, it is a crime to enslave a human being. In England, they have serfdom, but they don't have slavery. In England, it is a crime to mutilate a human being, to brand a human being with hot irons, to all of these terrible things that they put in their slave code. It is a crime in England because it is being committed against a human being. So they say, we, the Barbados House of Assembly, we take it upon ourselves to determine that these Africans are not human beings. And therefore, the legal system in England that is designed to apply to human beings cannot be applied to these wild and barbarous creatures. And we are therefore entitled to design a new legal system to apply to these strange, barbarous creatures that are not human beings. So that is the basis of this notion that slavery is legal. So the system in place is that the Barbados House of Assembly passes an act of Parliament. That act is passed up to Britain. In order for that act to become law, it must receive the consent of the British monarch, so it is passed up to the UK. And they seek to legitimize what is totally illegitimate. Because no legislative body can transform a human being into something other than a human being. It is a factual, it is a factual absurdity. And that there's a general principle of law that a factual absurdity enacted into law is null and void. So those pieces of legislation that the Barbados government enacted that were then became the model. It became the model for Jamaica. It became the model for South Carolina. It went all across the so-called 13 colonies of North America. It became the model for slave legislation. It started in Barbados. It was based on a factual absurdity. It was therefore null and void. In other words, slavery was never legal. It was never legal under the national law, the national jurisdiction of the UK, nor was it legal under international law. I don't have the time to go into international law, but when you look at the scholars who write about international law at that period of history, you could make a case that serfdom was legal under international law, because many societies practiced serfdom. And they tell you that there was slavery in Africa. No. There was serfdom in Africa, just as there was serfdom in the UK and in England and across Europe. But this chattel slavery was something totally different from serfdom. This was a system that dehumanized human beings. This was a system that imposed punishments of a depravity never found in any system of serfdom. So this was something totally different. So the point is, when in 2024, they're still telling you that they don't owe reparations because slavery was legal, they are exhibiting an appalling moral bankruptcy. But it is not surprising, because even in 1833, when they came to pass the Act, the Abolition Act, the Slavery Abolition Act in the UK Parliament, think about it. They reinforce the notion that Africans are not human beings. Because in the very text of their legislation, what was the mechanism for abolishing slavery? Well, they said, look, in order to abolish slavery, we have to do a calculation of the value of these pieces of property that the slave owners possess. In other words, our ancestors, even in 1833, even by 1833, our ancestors were still not deemed to be human beings. Even when they came to abolish slavery, the premise for the abolition of slavery was that our ancestors were pieces of property. And if you are going to take away these pieces of property from the slave owner, well, you have to calculate the value of those pieces of property, and you have to compensate the slave owner for their loss of property. So they did a calculation. They calculated what was the value of this generation of pieces of property, and they worked out a value of 47 million pounds. That was the value of this property that the British slave owners were losing. So even then, they were still being guided by the notion that our people were not human beings. And in that post-emancipation period, I mean, if you look at how they treated our people, even after slavery was abolished, for 100 years after slavery was abolished, it was appalling. I have here some statistics from a book called Holding Aloft the Banner of Ethiopia by Winston James, and it focuses on Barbados. And just to give you an idea of what Barbados was like, the kind of oppression that was visited on the black people of Barbados, so that by, let me just quote quickly from Mr. James. He says, Barbados disgorged 150,000 of its sons and daughters between 1861 and 1921, and estimated 104,000 settled abroad. Why did Barbados lose so many of its people through migration? Simply put, life on Barbados was hard for the mass of its people. The average number of deaths of infants under 1 year per 1,000 live births for the years 1900 to 1904 was 282. Every 1,000 births, 282 died before the age of 1. In 1906, conditions had deteriorated to the level where half the infants of St. Michael Parish died before they were a year old. During the decade between 1910 to 1920 to 1922, the average length of life for Barbadians shortened. For women, it fell from 32.5 to 31.9 years. And Barbadian men lived on average 28.5 years, slightly down from the 28.7 years for 1910 to 1912. In 1920 to 22, Barbadian women died before they were 32. Barbados's infant mortality rate rose during most years of the 1920s, reaching an appallingly high 401 in 1921 due to disease and exceptionally bad circumstances that year. That is a testimony to what happens when you don't see people as human beings. You see them as pieces of property or wild animals, and you treat them in accordance with that notion. So, brothers and sisters, we have a challenge on our hands. We have a challenge on our hands. You see, when we started this CARICOM reparations campaign, I remember it well. I remember that day in September 2013, Monday the 16th of September 2013, when we all journeyed to Kingstown in St. Vincent to put together the whole structure of the CARICOM campaign, the Reparations Commission and so forth. I remember the eloquent Sir Hilary Beckles addressing us all in Kingstown. And on that memorable occasion, we said that the 21st century was going to be the century of reparative justice. We said that we were starting a movement of redemption, a movement to heal dysfunctional centuries-long relationships between the black and white and brown people of the world. That we were going to develop, we were going to repair the damage, we were going to reach out, and we were going to take our relationships to higher and more noble level. And that this century, this 21st century, was going to be a century of redemption, of new beginnings, of new and more noble and elevated relationships. While we were doing that, so that was our thinking. This is the mission that we were embarked upon, a mission of redemption, of restorative justice, of reparations, of repairing the damage, repairing the dysfunctional relationships. While we were doing that, the then government in the UK was embarking upon something called the hostile environment policy, making life extremely difficult for Caribbean and African migrants in the UK. And now, after some, 11 years, we can now see very clearly that what we are dealing with is a still entrenched oligarchical mindset. It is still there. As I said, we give credit to those who have shown a moral conscience, but the reality is that that ruling class still has that oligarchical mindset that seemingly makes it incapable for them to recognize our humanity. And therefore, it does not surprise me that, you have ruling classes all across Europe that can watch on at the barbarity taking place in Gaza, can watch a genocide televised before their very eyes that comes into their living rooms every night on the television screen, and it seems to make no difference. It's as if they cannot see those Palestinian people as human beings. So that oligarchical mindset is very much still intact. And it says to me that our job, look, we have to deconstruct and expose and lay bare not only their deep and widespread involvement in slavery and enslavement. I mean, sometimes every now and then you would hear about, it has been discovered that this institution in the UK or in Europe, or this family, has a history of involvement in enslavement. And I laugh. I said, but why are you surprised? Because almost everybody, almost every aspect of the establishment in these countries were involved. And about a year and a half ago, the Anglican Church, the British Anglican Church, did an investigation into their own involvement in enslavement. And they just looked at one little part of their involvement in enslavement. They looked at the investment fund that they had called the Queen Anne's Bounty back in the early 17th century, that they invested in a slave trading company called the South Sea Company. Just that. They investigated that. And based on that investigation, they recognized how deeply embedded they were implicated in enslavement. And they apologized. They issued an apology. And they said that they had to do something to help repair the damage, and that they would set up a £100 million investment fund. But that caused me to go and look. I said, but if the Anglican Church was involved with the South Sea Company, who else was involved with the South Sea Company? And this is what I found. The British government. The British government actually created the South Sea Company as a public-private partnership. And it was the British government that negotiated with the government of Spain to gain the asiento. The asiento was the contract to provide slaves, enslaved Africans, to all of the Spanish colonies of the New World. So they acquired the asiento and gave it to the South Sea Company to go to Africa, to bring slaves, to provide them for all the Spanish colonies in this part of the world. They sold the asiento to the South Sea Company. In addition, the British government required the South Sea Company to provide it with a quantity of valuable company shares in exchange for £9 million of unfunded British government securities. The British royal family, Queen Anne, was allocated 22.5% of the South Sea Company's stock. Her successor, King George I, took over her shares and bought more, as did his heir, the Prince of Wales, who actually became governor of the company in 1715. In addition, virtually all of the royal family were shareholders, including, according to the British historian Hugh Thomas, the bastards. those who were born out of wedlock, even they were shareholders. The British establishment, company shareholders included the Earl of Halifax, founder of the Bank of England, the elite politician James Craggs, the Master of the Rolls, that is the head of the Court of Appeal, Sir Joseph Jekyll. The list of shareholders read like a directory of contemporary Britain. Most of the House of Commons, 462 members were shareholders, and 100 members of the House of Lords out of a total of 200 were included. Literary and scientific luminaries, literary icons like Jonathan Swift, Alexander Pope, John Gay, Daniel Defoe were all deeply involved with the South Sea Company, as was the legendary scientist Sir Isaac Newton. Non-British entities, not only the British ruling class, other European nationalities. The King Philip V of Spain was allocated 28% of the stock upon formation of the company. We have to expose this.
Ambassador.
I know. I coming home now. I coming home. But we have to expose this. And that is why we need these. We need the academics. We need the scholars. We have a lot of work to do. We have to, but not just to expose this, but we have to call the bluff of these people who pose that they are the model and exemplars of civilization, because we have to tell them the truth about themselves. You who feel that slavery was legal because African people were not human beings, we need to tell you that what you call European civilization was based on genocide, was based on slavery, was based on crimes against humanity, was based on wholesale theft. In other words, brothers and sisters, we have to get serious with these people. Yes, we want the 21st century to be the century of reparative justice, but we have to confront, and we welcome the allies. We welcome the repair campaign coming out of Ireland. We welcome the heirs of slavery. We welcome the Anglican Church. We welcome all of the people of good moral conscience in the UK. We welcome them as allies in our struggle. But those who still represent that oligarchical mindset, we have to challenge them, and we have to confront them with the bare, brutal facts of history. And finally, we have to move now to a legal option. Yes, we have to do the public education, we have to do the research, we have to expose the history, we have to capture the conscience of the world. We have to bring the conscience of the world to our side, to get world public opinion on our side. However, the time has also come where we need to now look at exercising the legal option. And there are two ways in which we can exercise that legal option. We can exercise it through the International Court of Justice. We can either exercise it, there's some technicalities that maybe we could get into this when we discuss later on, but we can exercise it through the International Court of Justice, or we can exercise it through some of the international treaties, some of the international conventions that these European countries are party to. For example, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. And there is a way that you could act through the treaty and get to the International Court of Justice. But as I said, maybe that can come out in our subsequent discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Commissiong. We have some special guests joining us this evening, those online and even within the audience. We welcome MP for St. James North, Edmund Hinkson and family. We also welcome CEO of COB, Steve Bell and family, Brother Buddy Larrier as well. Brother Adrian Green in the back, Sister Katura Bab, Brother Tony Reed as well. We're going to hand over the baton to MP Prescod, who will be speaking to policy work and the focus of the National Task Force of Reparations, where he sits as chairman.
Thank you very much.
15 minutes.
Madam Chair.
15 minutes if possible.
I went for how long? 17?
It was a time. It was a time.
Okay, I won't take precedent from David on this one. But I want to bring the conversation back to what I call the ultimate point, which is reparations. I am not going to speak about any reparatory justice because I'm always very cautious about language. In the same way the British and other European countries was able to sell the words slave to black human beings, and they're always repeating when we were slaves. I understand the psychology in the game. I understand it very, very well. And my understanding then derived from the British elites of the time, because they are the persons who injected the poison in the minds of the black people. John Locke and all the philosophers of the time felt there was a necessity to justify what they were doing. They denounced all arguments in relation to if we were human beings or not, because they want to justify the criminal act of what is called slavery. So I understand well how the legal instruments follow, because they had the legal instruments could only follow because the elites, the educated elites of the time, create the ideology that allow those people who were in parliament that passed the laws to put the ideology into legal instruments and classify us as slaves. But as you said, in classifying us as slaves, they were also very clear that a slave was not a human being. And that is where the damage really is, and that is something that we must seek to undo as a result of education. I am very, very cautious of all those people who are very counter reparations. Their whole body of persons. Up to today, I see a man saying that black people were never enslaved. And obviously, he's not a buffoon. He wrote extensively on the subject matter and used social media to get the message through. And we're meeting people who are willing to say, I am sorry. And that's why I have a distinction between what is reparatory justice and what is reparation. The major issue at the Durban conference, David, that you went to, and Professor Beckles went to, and Dr. George Bell went to, the major issue was getting that word reparation on the agenda for discussion. The Americans withdrew. All the European countries refused to accept the word reparations in the debate in Durban. I have to ask myself, why? But now these same people are prepared to use reparatory justice. And because reparatory justice speaks to the morality of it. But reparations is very clear. This is a crime against humanity. This is not a moral issue. This is a crime that you have to pay for. I'm urging everybody to think carefully about carrying an argument based on the melody. The melody, romanticizing a very serious issue. Well, we're prepared to talk about social justice. The church just came to Barbados. I was willing to talk about social justice. But they said that they have 18 million pounds to inject into the development of Barbados, but they must hold it for themselves. So we have a state that set up an institution called a National Task Force. There's no mechanism, but there's a way that they can pay the money into the state. We have the consolidated fund. Preferably, I would like to see a special unit set up for the receiving of any reparations funds. So I am very cautious about these new terms, just like I'm cautious about reading history and getting absorbed into the psychological blow or damage of referring to myself or my former people as slaves. And as you said, rightfully so, there was no slavery in England. But in order to call us slaves, they made sure we get dehumanized. And now the church is coming here, who talk about Christianizing us. But the church don't want to pass any funds to the state to address all the disadvantages that the working class people experiencing. They want to spend the money themselves. They don't even want to discuss what is the value of the accumulated wealth that they have raped the resources of this country out of for all of these years, centuries. They don't want that discussion. We have a clear calculation of $7.7 trillion. Pounds. And we're down here discussing if they should pay if they can pay or not. That is not on their agenda. That is not on their agenda. So I felt, as well as the members of the task force, not Pressy alone, that we should come to the people and not allow the people to be part of the void that need to be filled. What I have seen in history all my life is that there's a trend. I know once Professor Bell talked about the 60-year cycle. What I am seeing all the time is that in every first half of the centuries that pass, there have been some progressive steps by our people. I feel that we are in the 21st century now, and that is why I said a good topic should be reparations now. Because people want to know why now. Why nobody ever asked about it. We took the break from the enslavement step by step. You will see what we did. And I just made some notes. And I feel that it is important to, well, I respect the historical view. And I'm very much part of the advocates that reflect on the historical view. I still believe that we still need to put it in the scientific, and I'm talking not about science in terms of natural science, but I think we still need to put it in a sociological interpretation of what transpired at almost every first half of the various centuries. And if I look at the 20th century and go back, the 20th century working class people led the revolutionary changes. The black elite and the non-black elite carried us through a gradualist journey that appeared to be never-ending. It is when people like Garvey came on the scene ignored, degraded. Now today, there's no writer in the black world that don't know Marcus Garvey. But he was the worst thing under the sun in the 20th century, the first half of the 20th century. Yet the messages of Garvey and the philosophical thoughts of Garvey surpassed all the other trained philosophers and has influenced the thinking of our people. Garvey and the UNIA influenced the thinking of our people. The revolutionary changes that came in that first half of the 20th century came as a result of the ordinary people expressing their concerns. Many of the things that David talked about the mortality rates and the suffering, those were the expressions that came from the masses of people. My view is if you want to see change come, if you want to see the people move, it has to come from the masses. I am of that opinion. Not even as a parliamentarian, I don't believe that the parliament move anything. The parliament spends a lot of time talking pretty. Everyone will prove that they know things that they don't know. But you know when they move, is when the people move, the workers. First half of the 20th century, the unions were formed. And the unions had muscle. While people were reasoning in the House Assembly, the people were on the ground. And I felt that it was wrong to keep the people in perpetual ignorance by not letting them know even the challenges that we face, even at the level of the task force. The task force is a unit within government with little muscle. It is a feeble unit and responsible for it. That is why it was described as just an idea group, just a group that gives opinions. We can't move anything. Now we are now asking from within that it give us a unit that is a little more autonomous, with a little more power, that we can make the changes. We can't go discussing things at Durban and at the UN and the United States looking at us with all of these colonies. We have Africa, we talk about unity of black people wherever they are in the diaspora, and the United States saying to us, and we don't try hard to reason to see how we could find a weapon, and I don't necessarily mean a military weapon in terms of armaments, but we can't find a way of responding to these people. And they forced a compromise at that conference. They forced a compromise. David was there. I applaud David and Hillary and Dr. Bell and the present Prime Minister, who was very much engaged in the discussions prior to this. She did not go because at the time Owen Haffer, for whatever reason, moved her from the ministry that she had and put her to be Attorney General. So she did not go. But she was one of the leading voices at the time in the Caribbean on reparations. I personally believe, okay, I don't like to say these things because he's dead, but I personally believe that that was a shift deliberately in order to keep friendship with the international establishment. I know how this thing plays. I'm a victim of that kind of behavior. I know how these things work. I feel that the masses must speak. I know voices in this country, and I can see some of them here, that engage me when I am on the streets. And these are very much like the people that I talk about, the Marcus Garveys, and the trade union movements in the early days, and the black Barbadians who returned from the Panama Canal, fought for change that gave us self-government. The first half of the 20th century, what the people were saying and doing on the ground. It's the same thing that occurred in the 19th century, before the Emancipation Proclamation. The Haitians moved. And they keep selling it to you that it was not a victory. Sometimes it's the first victory. But you witness the obstacles that were put in the path of Haiti from developing since the revolution start in 1791. You saw that for yourselves. And I still hear black people that walk about over here and how backward the Haitian people are. I will want to live there. And that's why I said history is important. Because if you really understand your history, if you read even Frederick Douglass of the time, the activist, the writer, the revolutionary of the time, Douglass was saying that each black man owes his freedom to the Haitian struggle and to the Haitian people. There's not a black man alive here on the continent of Africa that don't owe a debt to Haiti. That Haitian revolution that the people completed in Haiti in 1804, Professor Rodney, in 1804, that they make you believe that we had to struggle to 1823 and all kinds of things in order to pay compensation to the French. We shut down the whole show by 1804. And the Haitians defeated the French European, the Spanish European, and the English European. The people moved. And therefore, we saw men like Dessalines coming on the scene. And Dessalines made it very clear. Light skin, dark skin, whatever skin color, whatever pigment you have, if you want to be a Haitian, you must recognize that you're black. That is how we have to behave. I will behave so until eternity. But I don't know if you really want to do the same thing as me. And then you can't eat. And then you can't eat. But the Haitian Revolution gave freedom through Simon Boulevard to Colombia, to Venezuela and Colombia itself. There was Simon Boulevard, who as a result of the interaction with the Haitian people, the history books tell you ultimately Pétain, who placed the referee at the hands of Simon Boulevard to go and liberate the people. I'm talking about 1816. That's what I'm telling you, the first half of all the centuries since slavery, the masses of people played a very important role. These people that we're talking about are the people who they say were slaves, enslaved people. They led the revolutions. Not the intellectuals. The intellectuals write what they saw. But some of the intellectuals never even saw a gun. The revolutionary people went on the streets and changed conditions with what people call inferior weaponry. And when you want to see things change, the masses must move. The masses must always move. When the masses continue to behave passive and let people say, got to be humble and do nothing about the changes, nothing happens. And the basis of coming here is because we gave that promise in St. Vincent at the same meeting that David talked about. The Rastafari movement was downstairs while part of the meeting in St. Vincent went on upstairs about politicians and intellectuals. I had to hold the masses together. Buddy Liar, you were there. You were there. And I keep saying, what is this thing? What is happening? The Rastafarians were asking for a footing. Let us get a foot in. Whatever committees are being formed, we were out there for a long time talking about repatriation.
Mr. Prescod, I would like to get a foot in here if possible. I would like to get a foot in here. Time. We're kind of tight on time. Yeah.
I didn't want your guidance. I'm sorry, right? But the Rastafarian movement was asking to be part and parcel of the dialogue. Even at the meeting, I don't know if you heard, David, because you were among the privileged few on the upstairs section. I don't know if Buddy sneaked out. Buddy, you left me? I was downstairs with the fellas. You sneaked out.
I was representing the mass among the privileged ones.
No, I blame. It's not anything negative against you. But I'm telling you that I think that I am asking, we got to find a mechanism. What we've been doing is we've been meeting with the 12 tribes, the Rastafari movement. We've been meeting with the spiritual Baptists. We've been meeting with other brethren. But we felt that it was important for us to come to the people with a meeting such as this. I hope that when we leave here, we can understand the benefits of this effort in coming to the people, because we meet within a board with some nice mahogany and some nice lights and air conditioning and everything, and we discussing the issues related to the masses of the people. But I believe that time has passed. The masses of people are educated or even miseducated as a result of the system, but we feel that we should be hearing your voice. And that's I'm hoping that you would answer some questions and that you will help us to shape the policy of the. Don't be afraid to answer questions. I think when we reach a certain level of maturity, not by age, but by intelligence, I believe that we must be prepared to ask questions, even if they are uncomfortable, not disrespectful, but even if they're uncomfortable. I believe that is why we are here. And in order for me to urge the task force to continue this, I need us to really set an example of what we are capable of doing as a people. And as a result of what you say here to us, we will go back to the drawing board. We will try to see if physically how we can incorporate even a wider body of persons, even if it requires a set of subcommittees, different groups to express their feeling. Balboa, I'm just suggesting that, right? Anyhow, Macron, let me apologize. I hope I didn't exceed. I hope I didn't exceed the 15 minutes. Yeah, thank you very much. David, boy, I will never follow you again.
Thank you, Mr. Prescod. We want to invite Brother John Howell up for a libation, to offer the libation.
And then we will have the question.
And then we'll have the question and answer segment. So while Brother Howell comes up, we will just ask you to compile your questions, any questions that you may have for the task force, or comments regarding the reparatory justice fight. We want to send a special shout out to some of our commissioners here this evening, Sister Andrea King, Brother Ian Douglas, well-known dance choreographer, Brother Alistair Alexander as well, and Brother Kelvin Carvalho as well, who has joined us this evening. And Brother Anthony Reed as well, of course. Brother Tony Reed.
You know, we've come a long way, but we have a longer way to go. I've asked to do a libation that is usually done at the beginning of the ceremony. We want to invite the ancestors to come and join us and to give guidance to the session. Ileg bakona, ileg bako, 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 ileg bakona. Ileg bako, ileg bako na, ileg bako, ileg bako na. At this point in time, we would like to invite the universal energies, to join us. Iba Shango, Iba Oya, Iba Abatala, Iba Oshun, Iba Yemanja, Iba Olokun, Iba Baborisha, Iba Baborisha, Iba Baborisha. When we talk about universal energies, we talk about fire, Shango. We talk about Oshun, which is reproduction. We talk about all these other, we talk about Oya, which is the wind, right? And these are energies that we interact with on a daily basis, right? They're part of us and we are part of them. And we say, when we meet as African people, we say thank you to these universal energies that we interact with, that keep us alive every day. We talk about Mama Letta, Onile, the earth. The earth produces food. We stand on the earth, there's nowhere else to stand, right? And so we give thanks to Mama Letta for feeding us every single day of our lives. And we respect and we say, thank you. I know the scientists has figured out that if you have two plants and you give one love and you give the other one a lot of hate and stuff, the one that receives the love will flourish. And the other one would kind of wither away and not do very well. So we understand why we should always respect Mother Nature, because that is who we are. This journey didn't just start. We hear about the Office of Reparations and Economic Enfranchisement. But this journey had started a long time ago. It was often being said that the person who jumped overboard in that slave ship, rejected what they were about to face, and they would have faced death as opposed to being enslaved on these islands and these parts of the world. And we give thanks to all of them. I want to briefly remember a brother called Tony. And not this Tony over here. I know he knows what I'm talking about. In the 1675 revolt, King Cuffy was supposed to be made king of Barbados. The enslaved had a plan to run this country and to take it over. And somebody sold out. One of our own kind sold out. And so they were going around trying to find out who was involved in these plots. And this brother was about to call some names. And Tony said, "You fool, you don't see what is happening to your own brothers and sisters?" And the brother kept silent. The slave master looked at Tony and said, "Tony, we're gonna roast you." Tony said, "Get on with the job. If you roast me today, you can't roast me tomorrow." And we pour a libation to Tony. I have a sister here who will assist me in calling some names. It is always nice to have our sisters around who are willing to take up the mantle. Right? I know her cousin, her uncle, very familiar to us, Bobby Clark, and she's walking in his footsteps. So I want to Ibashe. I pay homage, I pay respect to Ibashe.
Kwame Nkrumah,
Ibashe.
Samora Machel,
Ibashe.
Patrice Lumumba,
Ibashe.
Sekou Touré,
Ibashe.
Winnie Mandela,
Ibashe.
Nelson Mandela,
Ibashe.
Haile Selassie,
Ibashe.
Errol Walton Barrow,
Ibashe.
Eric Williams,
Ibashe.
Kwame Touré,
Ibashe.
Edward Wilmot Blyden,
Ibashe.
Jean-Jacques Dessalines,
Ibashe.
sorry, Robert Nesta Marley,
Ibashe.
Amy Jacques Garvey,
Ibashe.
Marcus Garvey,
Ibashe.
Amy Ashwood Garvey,
Ibashe.
Cecile Fatiman,
Ibashe.
Henry Sylvester Williams,
Ibashe.
Bobby known Robert Clark,
Ibashe.
Nzinga,
Ibashe.
Ya Asentatiwa,
Ibashe.
Menon Ford,
Mignon Ford.
sorry, Israel Lovell,
Ibashe.
Anthony Barkley, Nanny Gregg,
Ibashe.
Bussa,
Ibashe. 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 Ibashe.
Sonia Williams,
Ibashe. 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 It'd be remiss of me to be in this gathering here today and not remember our brother Tyrone Trotman. He has given a life service to the struggle of African people in dance in whatever form, and we want to show honor and respect to him. Barbarileo, 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 Tyrone T. Bere, Barbarileo. also, you know, we talk about the drums. The drums have the ability to bring in the spirit. However, the drums cannot do it alone. And so we want to give thanks and praise to our brothers from the Israel Level Foundation. Libation.
Many thanks to our cohort of drummers and to Brother Baba John as well. We could definitely feel and our sister, not forgetting our sister as well for that very wonderful libation. Yeah. I don't know if anybody has any questions regarding the National Task Force. If Bussa could do it in 1816, we can do it as well. If Clement Payne could do it in the 1930s, we can do it as well. There's nothing to fear. And I'm sure the system at the time was much different to the system now. So we really shouldn't have any fear as, you know, part of the collective, part of the masses going forward. We should really be moving forward fearlessly as people of African descent. Anybody? The mic is open. If you could just introduce yourself
Hi,
first.
good evening. My name is John Seeley. I sat there and I listened with close attention, but I'm going to get straight to the point. I think it's time that we put the information that you give to us in the schools.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Dr. Worrell? We've passed the stage of history. As some person said, it's first emergency of now, it's now, right? And we cannot wait. The same time as 400 years, we cannot wait again. Mm-hmm. We have to get, Mr. Commissiong, we have to get all of that information you have, put it in a syllabus, influence the Ministry of Education. We have too many people in here who are connected to the government that can influence the Ministry of Education to put this information to the schools. And another thing too, we have to get to our athletes. Because Britain has deserted us, Trump is not interested in us. It was embarrassing to hear the first black leader of a conservative party in England say that she doesn't have any interest in reparations. So we have to get to our athletes to help spread the word, because we cannot have them out there running around in Europe pleasing thousands, millions of white people and not telling the white people that we have something that they want. They want our talent, and we have to use our talent as a bargaining chip. So I'm going to leave you with this here. get the schools involved in the history of our history, and encourage our athletes, use our athletes as spokespersons for the spreading of the message of reparations. In the early days, we had Muhammad Ali. We had a lot of American athletes who sensitized us to the Black Power movement. So we need to have our athletes now sensitize our people to reparations. Not only the justice side, but the actual reparations. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. Well-known editor from The Nation Publishing. And the time for reparations is now, so we forge ahead fearlessly.
I just want to make a response to the point about the curriculum, because I actually sat on a history curriculum committee that was chaired by Dr. Henderson Carter. It was a committee set up by the Ministry of Education to design a history syllabus for the primary schools and for the first 3 years in the secondary school. And we carried out our mission, and in that design, we included reparations as the final topic that our primary school students would learn before making the transition into secondary schools. We were informed that the ministry was going to run the new syllabus on a trial basis with a number of schools, and I think that was in fact done. But then it seems as if everything then just came to a halt. And in doing some of my own self-reflection, I wondered whether we had not made the syllabus a bit too heavy, because we tend to get carried away. We want to put everything. So I had wondered whether we had not made it a bit too difficult, I guess for the teachers and maybe even the students. And I had said to Dr. Carter that maybe we need to revisit it and simplify it, because I somehow felt that might have been part of the problem why, having done the trial run, they did not forge ahead with it. But suffice to say that it is correct that a knowledge of history is critical, and even certainly for the reparations movement, but even aside from reparations, even beyond reparations, the subject of history is really critical. And we know that we are facing a problem where more and more the subject of history seems to be being phased out in our education system. So I'm agreeing with you, and I'm saying that probably people like myself and Dr. Carter and the others who were on the committee, we need to double back and see if we could revive that effort and actually, make it a living success. I know, Rodney.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add that reparations is part of the history A-level syllabus. So some of it is taught, and there's an excellent little text written by Professor Lorraine Shepherd. However, just a small number of students are taking history, so just a small number of people are exposed to the subject of reparations in the CAPE syllabus. Thank you.
I think we have another question from the audience.
Right. Hi, good evening. The name is Alicia. Okay, I was invited here today not because I was interested in the topic. The person just thought I should come, right? And being here, pardon? Thank you. Right, being here, I've learned a lot. And it put me in a place where I need to go home and research a lot because I thought I was an expert on the whole slavery movement and all that. I thought I was really good at it. I realized I ain't know nothing, right? But in saying that, I heard the comment a lot, getting the masses to move, right? And I went to a school that taught me knowledge is power. And the masses, when they get together, there's power. But the thing about it, there's no knowledge. There are a lot of people, majority of the Barbadians are like me, who heard this, because I've heard this before, and all I'm thinking, yeah, you're fighting to get them to pay back the slave thing for all the punishment they put through. So you're trying to get back what we deserve to have. But that's where it stopped. And yeah, we are talking about going into the schools and educating. But the thing about it is we have a powerful tool that we never, ever use, and we don't use effectively. And see that thing called theater? As a theater artist, I realized we limit the power of theater. Back in the day, theater was used to bring over change, to bring reform. You don't have to put, like how you have to go through all this red tape to get things in school. You could go in the communities and put on performances, and theater takes a lot of different forms. It's time that people start using theater to get the message out there. People are entertained, but reform can come through theater. And you need to get out there and get people to do proper skits, powerful scripts to educate the masses. Do not wait to get a big Frank Coleman Hall or Daphne. Go to the people. Put a stage in different communities. You understand? Go out to people, bring the people, invite them to the playing park, any place like that, and have theater. And when you have those theater performances, make sure you have flyers. People like, the same way like, okay, as a Christian, we do open airs. We like to go out and we like to preach our hands out and things like that. The same way you can do that in churches. There's nothing that stops you from going into the community, have the proper documentation to give the people so they can research further, do the theater performances. You can even do community theater whereby you actually start teaching the people skits and things like that with a purpose in mind. Because if I can learn this little bit from here, it can be very effective in pushing it further. That's my contribution.
Thank you so much, Celicia. We have another question from the audience.
Eli Selassie, Jah Rastafari, Empress Menenai, Power of the Trinity. I give thanks and praises to be here tonight. But it's like hearing it over and over, right? No, I don't know, we're calling for the masses to step forward, to get involved. We have the CARICOM Commission on Reparations. But speaking as Rastafari, and just let me retract, Rastafari could have only have born out of the Caribbean. No place else on earth could have produced the liberty of Rastafari. Just by listening to the struggles and the oppression that this region went through, the Rasta man, Rasta woman step up. And we have reparations. We repair ourselves to the extent that some of us went overboard. And we are now trying to put certain pieces back together. But hearing the difficulty in gaining reparations, and one of the things that I've learned, not learned tonight, but I'm always mindful of, is that politics, we still are governed by our slave masters' rules and regulations. Don't care how we try to bend them and turn them, when it all boils down, we have to face his court. And we can look at on a daily level to see even the highest courts in the world, the ICC, the ICJ, all of them, is being ignored and laughed at. Only the small man is get carried before them. Look at Israel. Look at, it's sickening But only Rastafari can save this world, really and truly. You gotta skin up the whole apple cart. But I hear you all calling for the masses. Rastafari have a prime example among the politicians. Grenada, a perfect example. The revolution in Grenada, Rastafari on the front line. When the revolution thing, politicians telling Rasta trim. Rasta do go and trim and get a job and come up front. Them days done. Rasta ain't about that no more. Another thing, charity begins at home. If you want reparations from the old oppression, the ganja issue is a prime issue, and I would not let it rest. I would not let it rest because the CARICOM Commission set an example of how to deal with it. And here in Barbados, where the slave laws were, as Commissiong put it, written and enforced and spread. You mean to tell me a simple thing like that the government can't get right? Can't show compassion for the Rasta man? We still got to be begging. We're begging for reparations from people outside, something that we could do at home to show the people that we have a moral duty to a people post-independence that we oppress. We still dragging notes and want masses. The Rastaman could rally a lot of people to come forward if we want to, but we are doubtful because listen, we had the Commission for Pan-African Affairs. Government change, that going through the door. The brothers out there, party government, good. But I want to get put out. No, I don't even see no Pan-Africanist on the other side. So you know what I've done? I exposed now to get tormented again all over. Well, we got to get it right. Charity starts at home. Let I and I be able to use our ganja at home. We got to go to the court. Same way in court. No, that's foolishness, man. I give thanks. Rastafari.
I want to say something. I just want to respond to Ras Martin, not about the ganja. I'll let Eddie deal with that. the MPs in here will deal with the ganja part of it. But I don't want us to get the wrong idea. We have made tremendous progress in our reparations movement. In fact, what we are saying now is that we now have a movement. We now have a global movement. And not only in the Caribbean, it's in Africa as well. Africa is mobilized. The African Union has passed resolutions committed to reparations and are putting their infrastructure in place. So when we started on this journey, the Rasta started even long before us, but when those of us here around on this table, we started back in the 1990s. The considered opinion was that this was a pipe dream. I heard Rodney referring to us as madmen. Some people thought we were madmen. But the point is that we have made tremendous progress over the years, and we can now legitimately say that we do have a global reparations movement. So, but we know it's a struggle. We never expected that anything would, land in our lap, that we have to struggle. But what these people don't understand is that they don't know who they're dealing with. The Caribbean people are not an easy people. C.L.R. James said that they are the most rebellious people in the history of the world. When you look at the history of rebellion, Michael Creighton counted 75 slave rebellions and major conspiracies in the English-speaking Caribbean alone in the 200 years between the 1630s to the 1830s. And then you add in the French, you add in the Haitian Revolution, you add in the Cuban Revolution. The Caribbean people are the most revolutionary, the most rebellious people in the world. And so we have only just begun. The struggle has only just begun. And we are going to use every instrument at our disposal, from our scholarship, from the scholarship of the Hilary Beckelses and the Vereen Shepherds and the Rodney Worrells and our eminent historians, to the orators and the activists. We're going to mobilize our people. But as I said, we are also going to explore those legal options. So we have news. We have news for those who still represent that oligarchical mindset. And we are working with our allies. We are working with the Repair campaign. We are working with the heirs of slavery and so forth. We are working with allies even in the European countries. So I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression. There's no despondency or defeatism here. We are up for the struggle. And we are confident, I think I can speak for everybody in this task force, we are confident that we will win this battle. You cannot have the facts on your side, the history on your side, the law on your side, morality on your side, and not prevail. So we will prevail, but we have to see it through with discipline and commitment. Thank you.
Can we go to the left of the auditorium for the question?
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much for this great education today. I have a question for the task force. I want to know, with this reparation we are fighting for, in what form is it? Is it in the form of monetary or in the form of infrastructural development? I want to know. Secondly, I want to also know the collaboration that exists between the CARICOM and African Union in this struggle. What is the relationship? How serious is AU in this? Because I'm asking because African Union is a very great body that can assist the Caribbean community in this struggle. Because with about 55 independent states, if they all come together and join the CARICOM, I think that we can make a headway. With the struggle that enumerated by the members of the task force tonight, it's normal. Obviously, when you are fighting for freedom, you don't expect to get it easy. It's something, because I'm very sure that Barbados did not get independence easy. People fought, people died, blood was shed.
In the 1930s, yes. In the 1930s, yes, he's right. Blood was shed in the 1930s. That was where the breakthrough was made.
All right, so maybe I might have gotten it wrong, because but in my country, independence was not gotten easy. We had to struggle. Blood was shed in my country, Ghana. So that is how it was. And there's no any freedom easy anywhere. We need to fight for it. This struggle is normal. They will definitely resist. They will try to push us back. But we need to persist. And I'm very sure that with persistence we can make a headway. But I repeat, I come back to my earlier question. In what form, this reparation, in what form are we looking for? Is it in the form of monetary terms, or in the form of infrastructure development? That's what I want to know. Thank you. My name is Mohamed Faras. Thank you.
Thank you, my African
My brother, it will be in a multiplicity of forms, because the damage that has been done is a multiplicity of damages. And so, yes, some of it will be monetary. In fact, there have been calculations done as to what the monetary value of the compensation should be. And those were calculations based on the fruits of our ancestors' labor that was denied our ancestors. Also, the loss of liberty over multiple generations. Also, the severe punishments and personal injuries and psychological injuries. So Scholars who have done the calculation have looked at all of those, have looked at all of those factors, and then, of course, they apply an interest rate. So we do have figures. We do have figures that we are working with, admittedly very large figures. So we know what the legitimate financial compensation should be. But in addition, the CARICOM has taken the position that we want a developmental approach. So CARICOM is not looking at individual money checks. That's not the idea. So the idea is that we want to address the historical legacies of underdevelopment that are rooted in those centuries of colonialism, enslavement, crimes against humanity. So it will be a multifaceted approach, but we are at the stage where we need to hear from everybody. So nothing is worked out from a reparation. Reparations is a sacred cause that belongs to the African people, the mass of the African people. It does not belong to a governmental elite. It does not belong to an academic elite. It does not belong to an activist elite. It is a sacred cause that belongs to all of us. So we are still in the phase where everybody is entitled to come to the table and to give their ideas. What should this reparations look like? When we achieve it, how should we organize it? When we achieve money payments, for example, how should that money be organized? Who should control it? What should be the modalities? We know our Rastafari brothers and sisters, part of reparations is the repatriation, physical repatriation to the African continent. How do we put those programs in place? And yes, my brother, the African Union is on board. The African Union is lagging a bit behind CARICOM because we took that very important decision in 2013. So we have had over a decade now of developing the CARICOM reparations movement. But the African Union has come on board. They are in the process now. They're in the process now of putting in place their own infrastructure. But in CARICOM, we recognize the importance of that partnership with the African Union because, of course, Africa has a weight. I mean, 1.4 billion people, some 55 nation states. Africa has a weight that the Caribbean could never have. So in partnership, we know that we will be much more effective. But the National Task Force on Reparations, we have to do a lot more of these kind of community groundings where we meet with our people and we need to discuss, we need to hear the ideas about what form reparations should take. The CARICOM has this 10-point plan, but as you heard, that 10-point plan is under major revamping now. In fact, it will probably end up not so much as a 10-point plan. It's going to end up as a reparations manifesto. It's undergoing a major revamp. But even then, even that will not be the final word. That, our people must be involved and their ideas must go into the mix as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Can we go to the right of the auditorium?
Bongo Isaiah, Asian Tari Bingi. First question. Is Sir Hilary Beckles on this National Task Force for Reparations?
No, he's the head. Sir Hilary is the chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission. So the way it works, all of the CARICOM countries are supposed to establish a national commission or a national task force. And then the chairperson of each national commission or task force becomes a member of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, which is then chaired by Sir Hilary Beckles. And that CARICOM, and above that CARICOM Reparations Commission is the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on Reparations, which consists of 6 heads of government, and whichever head of government is at the time the chair of CARICOM. So you have Barbados, Haiti, St. Vincent, Suriname, I think Guyana. Anyhow, there's 6 of them, and Barbados is the chair. So the Barbados Prime Minister chairs the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on Reparations, and that subcommittee, that Prime Ministerial Subcommittee, is the highest structure of the CARICOM reparations infrastructure.
Give thanks. I just hear Commissiong, you say that the reparations is not for the elite. But I see in a trend setting that making it feel like the sufferers going feels it in this reparation, however it work out. Already we see university getting reparations, church getting reparations. So this thing like going down in pieces, this ain't going down. I don't like how you see it going in, if the sufferer is going to be really part of it. And there's Rastafari. Everyone know that and they call for reparations as part of the repatriation, as part of the reparations, because on this journey down here, they never asked to come down here. And these lands, I know a lot of people in here is prophecy people. These are the lands of the sinking sand. I know if the ones realize that every year from the 1st of July, we down here trembling and waiting for judgment. Every year we be waiting for judgment when these soul items can get licked down if we can feel it or not. I and the Rastafari, we call for repatriation, and we've been calling for a long time. And the reparations that they want is repatriation. The INA who don't want to go can stay, but INA need infrastructure in place. Listen, long time we call and hear about a direct flight to Africa. Short day, you know, we're the nearest country to Africa. For some reason, it can't happen, because for the amount of years that calling for a flight, and the Prime Minister said when she gets in power, she can make sure this happen. It's still ain't happening. There's some force, and everyone once realizes there's some force that is trying to stop people from going to Africa, you know. People will just gladly go to America without no problem. But when they come to Africa, you'll see the worst thing. You're going to that. And there's no place in the worse than America. When you go to America, you see the kind of racism, people getting, police killing black people, and everybody just running around go to America. And when they come to Africa, they try to deny and talk the worst things about Africa. But the reparations that they want is to put something in place where all of them that want to go home can go home. I want the task force to really think about these words that I'm saying, because some of them we had enough of these lands in the sinking sand. We had enough of down here, and down here is not looking good. And if you know, you will realize that most of the African countries is on the rise right now. Because how could you left a big continent, the biggest continent in the world, trust me, for little 106 km and these little lands that we don't hear feels in it. You know, I as Rastafari, the reparations that I want, without a doubt, is preparing a good infrastructure in place that they could leave these lands of the sinking sand. And the thing about it is that, like Martin just said, you know, I hear talk. You know, I don't want to get frustrated with the talk, because you know things is a process. Nothing don't just happen the same time. But I see like a backward movement happening, not in terms of the ones, but in terms of the people that's supposed to deal with the reparations. Everybody wants to try and start backing out now and saying that they're responsible for this. And then we talk about, like the idea talk about the roast, very few people that come and say, well, you're born in Africa and you realize that slavery is not your problem, sure, we can't deal with them kind of things. But and I give thanks that at least one's working towards the movement. But I want the ones to know in all the movements, remember that Rastafari called for repatriation, and don't forget that on the agenda.
Yeah.
Give thanks.
Unfortunately, the task force was not, we were not so privileged to be able to get around to all the different Rastafarian bodies. And we only had discussions with the 12 tribes and so on. But we intend to continue those discussions. And in the discussions, we agreed that in order to be repatriated, you have to go to whichever country you identify as, Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, wherever. You have to go and negotiate, obviously with the land space, the provision of utility services. Since the Rastafarian grouping might not have the finance to do so, one of the first things that we would like to do is when we receive funding from the Reparations program, is to make sure we arrange and provide the finance to enable the Rastafarian movement to go to the country of their choice by the funding that coming through the reparations, so they can make all the required arrangements for any repatriation.
Mr. Prescod,
exercise.
that is,
Obviously, they have to discuss
that is already in motion in Ethiopia. We have brethren, right now we have brethren on the land that they're getting some land, specifically looking to get land from, and I am from the Order of the Nyabingi.
Right.
And in case you know, the Order of the Nyabingi is the most ancient order in the Rastafari, and there is root. So if you want to come with there, you know, as a College Land, St. John, oldest tabernacle in the world right now is up there. That we've been there, so you know.
So you don't want the opportunity to make use of the reparation funds to help the other brothers who may not have the finance.
No, Mr. Prescod.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
What I hear you say is that you went to 12 tribes. So I just let you know that the Nyabingi is the most ancient order, and where we are.
Somebody got me first. Somebody got me first.
No, and there's no problem with that. But I just tell you where we are, that you could come and visit us and reason.
The other thing I want you to be very, very comfortable with is the arrangements between the Church of England and the Commissiong Trust. It is not considered by this task force as reparations. On the first,
It's charity.
it is charity. I can't stop anybody from giving charity. We can't stop anybody from giving charity. They came on the first occasion and they made an announcement that it was a reparations program. We met with the Commissiong Trust and we made it very clear that we don't consider that to be any reparation program.
Because the Commissiong land was built to the slaves. It was built to the slaves, and it was, they had it, the one that come up
We just want to make it
Yeah,
clear that
yeah,
we will be pursuing
I know that.
claim against the church.
But at the end of the day, the Church of England will face us. As long as I'm chairman and I have this body, the Church of England will face us. The arguments were very clear. The state has a unit to represent the people of Barbados. And no Church of England will set any agenda for us. And we were very clear that those funds would have to be paid into the state coffers. How we do it is our business. And how we spend that money will be the people's business, not the Church of England business. If they want to give away 18 million pounds, 18 million Barbados dollars, or 18 million Guyanese dollars, that's their business. But we made it very clear that is no reparation. Sometimes because of people not understand some of the rigidity of how the task force works and how the Caribbean Reparation Commission works. They believe that somebody could come and say, we're giving you reparation. If they're going to give, they can give a gift. But anytime they deal with reparation, they must pass through the body that understands. We're working on the calculation. I already tell you about the 7.7 trillion pounds that they're in. Nobody can't come and give us 18 minutes. We never will see the accounts. We don't know how they arrive at the figure. We don't know what percentage of their finances or their wealth they are offering. So we must man that, because the units which we are working with are units controlled by the people's government. So don't worry about that. Church of England wouldn't set no agenda about reparation for us. And that is the case. But I wanted to tell you that one of the big concerns which I have, and that's why I'm glad that we are here today, is I was so embarrassed having a meeting with, or rather meetings with the left wing of the Labour Party in England. And the left wing in England, white men and women willing to come to Barbados to take action wherever they can to help us bring the level of consciousness to the people and also to demonstrate in Barbados. It was embarrassed when they asked me, anytime you need us, we are prepared to come down and work with you in bringing the government to the level of consciousness and the people of Barbados fighting for the reparations. Right? I had no collective movement that I could rely on. I couldn't even entertain the conversation long. So what we hope is that at some point I can identify this body and all other black Barbadians or non-white people in Barbados as part of a movement. What I was saying before is that whenever we had that collective strength, if it is 1930s, whenever the collective strength was there, we made substantial progress. If it's in the 1816 revolt, we made substantial progress. When there's a one man or a little individual group keeping a lot of noise, nothing happens. So we need to work collectively. We need to be very clear on what we're doing, and I believe that we can achieve great things. This, as I indicated, this is the first in recent times of this kind. I can give you the assurance that we will reason on these things as much as we can, and the Rastafarian voices will be heard. The argument on many of us, we have different views on where we should be with the marijuana, Ras Martin. You know, we've been discussions about medical marijuana. The government been discussing medical marijuana. Some men believe that we should also have recreational marijuana. Others, and the argument now, there's also sacramental marijuana. And your man, Simba, is at present, I think Simba has the government at present in court on the use of the marijuana as at home. Right. So, and that is your right. That is your right. That is your right. If the Parliament of Barbados, if it has not given satisfaction to the Rastafarian community, me can't tell you about the rest. I would encourage you, go to the law courts of Barbados, get the matter settled, as the people in St. Kitts did, and resolve the problem that way. If you wait, and every parliamentarian tell you we're going to do something about it, and you see 4 and 5 and 6 years go on, and you all wait 60 years, just do what you have to do. So if you feel that the best way to fight it, the Rastafarian community must fight it in the Supreme Court, and let us hear what the outcome is. And then the government will be bound by the arrangements coming from the Supreme Court.
Mr. Prescod, we
Yeah.
have another question
Oh, yeah, sure.
in the audience.
Let me just say something.
We wanted to respond.
Right. So let me say it today, Rastafari brethren. Repatriation is still big on the agenda. However, the problem or the challenges would have to be sorted out as well from the African side as well. Because in 2016, I was there at the 8th Pan-African Congress, and these kinds of questions arose as well. I think at the time, the brethren in Ethiopia, they had some challenges getting citizenship rights as well. Right. So I think Ghana went a step further as well on the Rawlins. But yeah, these are still some of the challenges. So as Amilcar Cabral would have said, tell no lies, seek no easy victories. So I will tell you the truth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Good night, Leroy McLean. Reparations,
Citizenship.
a very romantic sounding word. Sounds smooth and gentle, in fact. And I would venture to say that we could not find 15% of the people in Barbados who know what we're talking about when we talk about reparations. What is it? Some people can't even call it. And I would like to beg your indulgence to give you a personal example. I once made a suggestion to a prime minister, and he said to me, Leroy, that is a good idea, but it would not work. So I said, well, if it's a good idea, why wouldn't it work? He said, because you'll be too far ahead of the people, and they won't see where you're going. If you're leading people, you got to always make sure that they can see where you are going. I don't think enough has been done to let the people of Barbados know what is reparations and why there's a need for reparations. Now, some years ago, the Spicestown formed a sister relationship, I think, with Bristol in England. Bristol, which was probably the heart or the pulse of the slave trade. Bristol University was built with funds from the slave trade. The city of Bristol was developed out of funds from the slave trade. But while their university is flourishing, ours is languishing, looking for funds. Now, reparations also is a gentle word for some of the people in England, because I heard a parliamentarian in England say, we are not paying anything because we spent a lot of money to help to end slavery. I don't know how many people heard that. A British parliamentarian said so. We don't have to give you anything. We spend a lot of money to end slavery. The money they spent was to pay the slave owners for the loss of their property. And ironically, the Caribbean people who went to England to work paid taxes to help to repay that money. The money that they borrowed from Lloyd's to pay the slave owners, they only finished paying for it a couple years ago.
2015.
So the people of the Caribbean who went to England and worked as nurses, bus drivers, bus conductors, whatever, their taxes helped to pay the people for the people who enslaved us. So the word there you stole us. A crime has been committed. We don't want any repair. We want compensation for that crime that was committed. And we need to stop being academic and gentle and romantic about this thing of reparations and call it what it is. So the first thing I would like us to do is to get the people of Barbados and the region to understand what it is that we're fighting for. We're not fighting for any charity, because the people in England who say they're not interested in reparations speak of it as if it is some kind of charity that they're giving us. They're not giving us anything. They're supposed to pay for the crime that they committed. And we have got to put it in those terms. You committed a crime, therefore you need to pay. And if it doesn't happen, sooner or later, the South will have to raise up against the North. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. We're going to take one
was waiting for a long time, right?
more question from Reverend Buddy Larry, but before we do, okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make a couple of points, but the brother that just spoke helped me to put this into context. And I just came back from England Monday week. And I don't know if you all know, but there's a group in England that has now started, this year is the second year. It's called the All-Party Reparations Committee. In other words, in England, there's different parties, and they have come, some of them have come together. And on the 27th of last month, they had a major reparation conference in London. There's also, in January, a group will be heading to Berlin to put the Berlin Conference of 1884-85 on the table to talk about repairing the damage through reparation for what Europeans did. So you must understand there's a lot is happening. But Trevor, it's important that when you go into the community and you're going to make reference about representation, such as the 2001 conference in Ghana, and you talk about who was there, you mentioned Sir Hilary Beckles, David Commissiong, and George Bell. But there's people who's there that's like my sister, representing the masses. I headed the NGO sector to Durban, but you didn't mention that. No, I'm just saying you didn't. Hey?
I wasn't aware.
You wasn't? You didn't know that? Well,
You didn't remember.
Oh, right, correct him. Don't say you don't know him, because you did, you would have known. Because you know that the following year, there was a massive conference here in Barbados where 500 plus people from around the world came to that conference. I was the coordinator of that conference because I headed the NGO sector. So you must be careful. If you're going to make reference, don't just make reference about the government department or the government representation. You must mention the mass people.
My apology.
Right?
My apology.
Okay. Because I'm saying what the mass amount of people, the mass amount of people, and I'm
Brother
not-
Larry, we're on a little bit tight on time.
Okay,
So if you
let,
can
let me close then by making this statement. I'm going to table this document for you. I brought it for you. In this document, I'm saying, if by tomorrow morning the government of Britain does not put 100 million pounds, listen to me, 100 million pounds in my account, listen to me, I know it might sound a bit mad, I'm not mad, but remember I was put in the mental hospital in 1977. So because they put in the mental hospital in 1977, they now have to pay reparations, right? And my case was put before the Royal Court of Justice on June this gone. And we are now settling for 100 million pounds, not dollars. If they don't settle from tomorrow evening, the Prime Minister got the information that I'm now going to put to you. I sent it to her on Saturday. No, on Friday. There will be a campaign, a global campaign, to make sure that the issue of mental health, not the issue of body malaria, but the issue of mental health, which apart from reparation is what the world is talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have a final comment from the audience from MP Kingston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this has been very interesting. I told Trevor on Tuesday that I would come. And I really urge the task force to move around Barbados with these kind of discussions, because I agree totally with Leroy that he put it at 15%, it may be even less, care about reparations. The thing is, it's not going to be fully achieved without unity among, I think, all black people in the world. Black people here, in Africa, in America. All of us were underdeveloped tremendously, not only during slavery, which in my opinion was the greatest crime, international crime against mankind. And people don't accept that. A lot of people outside of our race don't accept that. The Jews believe that what happened to them in the 6 years of Second World War is a greater crime than slavery. But that is because that is our fault, because we have not pushed it, we are not united as a people against what happened to our ancestors of slavery. And then after that, as part of colonialism, further colonialism, I mean, spoke about the 1881 division of Africa like a carving knife, which Walter Rodney's book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, speaks about tremendously. So, look, there's no doubt that, at least in my opinion, that legally we're entitled to reparations, in our case, from the United Kingdom, which was our colonial master. I think that King Charles clearly, I think, this is my opinion, personally realizes this because he has set up some kind of task force. I think he did that last year that has to report to him by 2026 on whether the royal family, his ancestors, were involved in slavery and what role they played and how much they have benefited financially and otherwise from it. And all the history shows that they have been. I think David read some of it there. As I said, the problem lies among ourselves. We have to unite. And you would notice, who mentioned it, David or Trevor, that England can always find black people and non-white people to plead their cause, that they don't have to pay anything, you know, because remember when they had the debate in the British Parliament on the 200th anniversary of the abolition of the slave trade in 2004, the people who spoke most strongly against reparations were black conservatives in Parliament too. So it isn't only now that the conservatives have a black leader that they're talking that there's no reparations. The last prime minister, a conservative prime minister, up to 5 months ago, was an Indian man from India. And I mean, I went to India, and if you see how the United Kingdom treated India and took all their gold and everything. But so this is something, look, England and Europe are not going to give us anything. No country such as theirs has given us anything. We have to take it. When you go to France, Paris, and you see the aura of Paris, you cry for Haiti. That Haiti is as is now because of France. And France, Paris certainly, where I've been twice, is so wealthy and so adored with gold. So look, your task, I think, brothers Trevor and David, and I know both of you all for years. David, I know you for over 50 years, is to spread this throughout Barbados. You have to get everybody behind you. And yes, you're getting some things, being the Church of England, the church, some families giving a little piece of thing. I've said in Parliament on at least one occasion, I think it was two, that the Anglican Church here has to pay redress too. And the Anglican Church here still owns a lot of land that people are on, and they can't get ownership of this land yet. The Anglican Church, I've said, out in the Glebe in St. George and out in St. John, needs to get the people the land. That is the truth, and empower them and enfranchise them. So we have to start here at home in that regard too. But, you know, Africa, no. I don't know there, yes, we have said 54 countries, 1.4 billion people. There's the United States, where up to 1857, a Supreme Court case said that black people are only 3/5 of a person. So it's all of this. But one question I like to ask, you know, part of the argument against reparations by white people, and they come with a lot of superfluous arguments, but they say, look, why are we asking them for reparations when it was our black African brothers who sold their own into slavery and sent them on ships to the Caribbean, who cooperated with white people to enslave us? And how do y'all answer that particular argument?
You can't have a seller if there's no buyer. So if they didn't go to buy, nobody will sell. So don't let them come down.
All right.
If I could just answer that.
In wrapping up.
Let me just answer that last question, though. Eddie, Portugal commenced the transatlantic slave trade in 1444 with a raid on the western coast of the African territory that is today known as Mauritania. This is how Gomes Ians de Zurara, a courtier of the Portuguese royal family, described the event in his Chronicle of the Discovery of Guinea. Quote, Most of the captives had been taken in a village where the Portuguese, shouting out St. James, St. George, and Portugal, at once attacked them, killing and taking all they could. Then might you see mothers forsaking their children, and husbands their wives, each striving to escape as best they could. Some drowned themselves in the water. Others thought to escape by hiding under their huts. Others stored their children among the seaweed, where our men found them afterwards. End of quote. That's how the Portuguese slave trade began, right? The British trade, on the other hand, started with the 2 voyages of Captain John Hawkins in 1562 and 1564. This is how these voyages were described in several publications, including the 1878 publication of the Hakluyt Society, entitled The Hawkins Voyages. Quote, Hawkins sailed with 3 ships from England in 1562. In the river Sierra Leone, he captured at least 300 blacks, partly, as he said, by the sword, and partly by other means. In 1564, Hawkins set out on a second voyage, the new expedition again made for the river Sierra Leone, and every day went on shore to take the inhabitants, burning and spoiling their towns. End of quote. So this is just 2 instances, the beginning of the Portuguese slave trade and the beginning of the British slave trade. And that beginning was an infliction of warfare and terror on the African people along the west coast of Africa, attacking them militarily, as I said, burning and spoiling their towns, killing people, etc. So, yes, so that is the beginnings. It developed from there. At some point, you had some African collaborators drawn into the whole exercise, but it's very complicated because many Africans had a choice. Either you cooperated or you will find yourself on a slave ship as well. So, there's several factors, but it is clear that this thing began as something orchestrated out of Europe, very hostile, very military, extremely terroristic. And the truth is, even African polities that collaborated, for example, the Ashanti collaborated at one point. What was the ultimate fate of the Ashanti? The ultimate fate of the Ashanti is that the British eventually turned against the Ashanti. They invaded them. They destroyed the Ashanti militarily, and they made it into a protectorate. So, if we are talking seriously about, and I'm actually quoting from an essay that I did on this, right? Exploding the myth of African responsibility for slavery, because this has come up several times in the past, and we have had to respond to it. But the reality is, this thing was orchestrated from Europe. It was used by Europe as a dynamo for Europe's development, develop the Industrial Revolution of Europe, transform Europe. And so if we are looking for the unjust enrichment, if we are looking for the spoils of transatlantic trade in enslaved Africans and chattel slavery, plantation slavery, we are not going to find it anywhere on the African continent. We're going to find it just as you said. We're going to find it just as you said in Paris and London, and you just have to go there and you see it displayed before your very eyes. So we know that that's a red herring. That's a red herring that they use, and we're not going to fall for it.
Just to quickly add, the system of slavery that existed in Africa was akin to a kind of serfdom. And therefore, the African people had no notion of chattel slavery as well. So they also had a notion that the same kind of fate would be similar to what obtained inside of Africa as well. So nobody came back and said, boy, this thing inside the Caribbean was so terrible. So I hope I shed additional light. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Worrell. As we wrap up our panel discussion this evening, I know MP Prescod would have mentioned that reparations has to come from the will of our people. It has to be a mass movement. So the final question would then be, how can we see that will of our people? I know John Seeley would have asked the question as well in terms of having athletes on board and having our people, having it as a table topic at breakfast tables in ordinary households, at, over dinner. How do we have this mass interest in reparations within the next decade or so?
I believe the initial step would have to be an intensive educational program, just as we are doing here now tonight. There's some questions that obviously, before people get involved, there's a necessity for clarity. Even the distinction of what is chattel slavery and what is the type of slavery that exists on the African continent. I was just looking for an article here written.
Servile labor. We don't even call it slavery.
What it served them,
servile labor.
all of these terms. That's why I said, when you read history, as a student of history myself, when you read history, you have to be careful with the language that you read. Or not, one person wrote, I wouldn't even mention his name because he was stupid enough to mention his name, a long article yesterday indicating that there was no slavery at all. This is something that we fabricated, and he's obviously not a backward man. He's backward in terms of ideas, but he can write the English language well. So, but I know I was so backward at it. But we have to mobilize, but you can't mobilize if you don't educate. So at this stage, we are into the education program. For some people, what some people call education, for others they call miseducation. So we don't have to put real education in the heads of people, and that's what we did tonight. Where there are areas that are cloudy, we try to see how we can bring some clarity to the clouds. When people get a better understanding of what we're doing as a task force, and what is the government policy on it. And the government policy cannot be considered to be consummate or realistic unless you hear the voices of the people. That is the thesis that I was trying to advance, that you have to hear the voices of the people. What are the things that we need to address? Some of the social and economic imbalances in the system itself. When I was coming here this evening as well, somebody called me and they wanted to come. They were concerned with about economic enfranchisement and how can we be talking about the injustices in the society? How can we be talking about human rights in the society? And there are major questions about economic imbalances in the system. And they were to come, but I haven't seen them here. They might have those things in their head, but then the lack of an important ingredient, and that is courage to speak in front of the public. That's why we're here. And I think that as we see that level of maturity, and I say that in a very meaningful way, some people believe that black people don't even have any clear idea of commerce. They sold that in the history too. That we were backward people, we know nothing about commerce. They exclude even vending as an area of commerce. Those are discussions that we must have. And with an enlightening public, I believe that we can plan a good strategy going forward. So I'm not going to bring a top-down approach. What I believe is the alternatives that we need to put in place at this stage. David already indicated at the 10-point plan and Rodney, that we're going to modify the 10-point plan. I was discussing it with David recently. I was asking, how could you modify something and it still remain a 10-point plan? And there were fundamental elements that need to be put into that plan. If we're going to move from 10-point plan to 11 or 12 or 13-point plan. You can't put in a fundamental point in the 10-point plan and still it is a 10-point plan and not create a complex document. So the issue, when it looks at the early 10-point plan, the issue on how we will conduct ourselves in relation to receiving funding, right? And receiving funding was excluded. So that's why I'm saying that these are things that require clarity. And I wouldn't say this is what we intend to do as we go forward, but this is an educational program here. This is the initial step. And I will hope that we can have some more of these sessions at different strategic geographical spaces across the country.
Thank you. Final remarks from Ambassador Commissiong and Dr. Worrell as well, or we'll end at MP Prescod.
No, we end there.
Yeah? All right, thank you.
Madam Chair, I would also like us to be able to thank persons from linking up on this session from United States, Canada, and so on the Zoom platform.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. We thank you. A big thank you to those who came out on Zoom as well. For Reparations Now, a talk on resistance, resilience, telling stories of how they sold us and how they now owe us. Thank you so much for coming out this evening, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Town Hall meeting. We also have some refreshments available for everybody as well. Thank you, and have a great week.